We're going to try something new today, guys. I'm going to read a Reddit post, explain it to you guys, and give my thoughts on it. So this post is called, "If you make a decent income, it becomes all about lifestyle creep." What he means by lifestyle creep is when you get a pay raise, your lifestyle gets a little bit higher and a little bit more expensive, and your spending goes up, and that is just an endless cycle that goes on and on and on. So every extra dollar you make is every extra dollar you spend. He says, "I spent my career at FANG. FANG stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. I'm FIRE now. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early." He specifies FANG because people at FANG earn high incomes. If he says he's FIRE now, that means he retired early in the Seattle area. "I viewed my position as a winning lottery ticket. Anyone at a higher leadership level at a FANG makes such an insane salary by comparison to any normal income that FI is clearly possible." FI means financial independence. That means the ability to quit working. "Since every one of my peers should have made $300,000 annually or often much more, you would expect they're all working because they love the work, not because they still need the money. Even with these high salaries, the majority of my coworkers spent a significant percentage of their income. They would talk about anxiously waiting for a stock vesting to pay off some bills." So if you're working at one of those companies, you'll get paid in stock, but you couldn't spend the stock immediately. You'll have to wait some period of time, between 1 and 3 years, before the stock vests and you could sell it and cash out and use the money. They'd talk about how their car payment on their Tesla or fancy BMW was almost done, which was a relief because it was hard to make ends meet. "I remember talking to someone who was certainly making 7 figures a year and had been for years. They said they needed probably another 10 plus years to be able to retire if they had cut down on their expenses. With complete seriousness, they said that their third vacation home was probably too expensive and they needed to really figure out a family budget. In the end, if you make a decent income, it is 100% about lifestyle creep. It's not necessarily about living like a college student, e.g. LeanFire. So LeanFire is a subreddit or a Reddit, part of Reddit where they talk about really cutting down on your expenses to achieve financial independence so you can retire early. Lifestyle creeps impact surprises people. It's not always about a third vacation home. Sometimes it's about the slightly more expensive car and the slightly more expensive vacation and the slightly nicer clothes. Next thing you know, you've received lovely 5% a year raises with a 6% a year expense increase. That's digging a hole, not improving the situation." So he's saying if you get a little raise, but your expenses go by even more, you're worse off than without the raise. Anyway, my main point is that income is necessary up to a certain point to be able to achieve FIRE, but the majority of people above that line shoot themselves in the foot all on their own by this lifestyle creep that this person's talking about. By the way, I totally agree with this. One strategy I've heard is when you get a raise, save half of it and spend the other half. So if you get a 5% raise, put 2.5% towards your savings and spend the other 2.5%. This allows some lifestyle creep, but it increases your savings at the same time. One of the comments says, "Vacation homes are weird to me. Why not rent a luxury Airbnb and explore a different location every time? Being locked into 1 or 2 areas for vacation because now you have to make use of your vacation home that you paid handsomely for. You have a mortgage looming over your head year round. All for what? 14 to 21 vacation days a year? Sounds good in theory only." I 100% agree. Why would you pay thousands of dollars every month for a home to sit empty? Why not just rent a different place whenever you want to go on vacation? That seems way more financially responsible, financially efficient. Just get a new place to stay when you want to go. If you want to go back to the same place, get the same place. But if you don't have to. And you don't have to worry about that place all year round. Maybe you would hire a management company to rent it out while you're not there, but this is lots of pain in the butt that you don't necessarily want to deal with, and it's probably not financially efficient to deal with. I agree with this person that says just rent a nice Airbnb when you want to go somewhere, which is 14 to 21 days a year. At the most, we Americans work a lot. Another comment says, there was a post, I think on Twitter or something a while back, about how a family making $200K a year could be or feel poor or be living paycheck to paycheck, presumably to draw up sympathy. They outlined a budget that included things like 2 abroad vacations a year, private schools, new clothes every month, amongst other things. Turns out, if you spend all your money, you won't have any left. That's exactly right. They sort of go on to say that the couple was actually making $500,000 a year but couldn't save any money. The CNBC link is right there. So you need to pay attention to savings. You need to make savings a priority. If you want to get out of the game, if you want to retire early, you can't spend what you make. You got to spend way less than you make. Another comment says, sometimes it's not even about creep. My colleague and his wife make $400,000 combined and are flat broke. He complains all the time about their spending, but according to him, his wife doesn't believe in saving. She likes living on the edge, spending more than they earn. It's scary talking to him, and they're both in their 60s. So that to me is crazy. You and your spouse, it's very, very important that you're on the same page as far as spending, as far as savings, as far as investing, as far as retiring. One couldn't be hardcore saver while the other is hardcore spender. You won't get anywhere. It's like tying a rope around two people's waists and having them run opposite directions, see how far they get. They're not gonna go anywhere. Just like if you want to try and save and your wife wants to try and spend, or vice versa, then you're in big trouble. You're not gonna get where you wanna go. The next comment says, as my wife and I have grown in our careers, lifestyle creep has set in, but we made ourselves a deal. As long as we can max out retirements, pay our agreed upon amount for the kids' college fund, and still maintain our emergency fund, then we can splurge. The creep is okay as long as you don't sacrifice what is really important. I agree with this. It can be in moderation. You don't need to live like a college student when you're older, but you need to keep saving. You need to be on the same page. You need to go ahead together. You need to make the savings a priority. You need to agree on it with your spouse. This next one says 100% this. That means what the original post said. It's all about lifestyle creep. This is like almost the entire majority of the medical field. So many of my colleagues and coworkers spending every single penny they make or even more. Some examples that stuck out to me at every stage. As a resident, he's a doctor, and he's saying, as a resident, we were making $60,000 a year. Went out with some friends on a conference once. I found a local pizzeria that sold humongous slices for $5. He bought a big slice of pizza and got one. Meanwhile, friend number one went to the bar across the street and spent $150 on beer. In a conversation, she once asked me, wait, how are you saving any money? I mean, come on, people, you gotta pay attention. You gotta at least know what it's like to live like a college student. You gotta pay attention. You can't be like that's a little bit nutty to spend there's a huge divergence between the guy who got the $5 slice of pizza for dinner and the other person who spent $150 at the bar. He goes on, 2 years ago, as a fellow was making $72,000. Friend number two, who made the same amount as I did, was going on expensive ski trips, eating out every single meal, living in a downtown apartment, rent $3,000 a month. She was blowing through her entire paycheck each month, plus a few $1,000s in stipend from her parents. She knew that I saved money, so she asked me for help saving $500 by the end of the year. $500? You can't do both things. You can't live a fancy, rich, spendy life and have financial independence. You have to pick one. You can be financially independent, or you can spend lots of money and have lots of stuff and lots of a fancy apartment. But you can't do both. There's not enough money to do both, and not for very many people. Fast forward to faculty job. My salary is $196,000. Friend number three from med school works in another state and makes close to $300,000 with bonuses. We were talking about lifestyle, and she mentions she is miserable and works close to 65 hours a week. I asked her why not cut back and work part-time, like 0.8 or something, so a 20% cut in pay and 20% cut in hours. And she responds, she can barely pay the bills. Turns out she would drop $150 to $200 consistently on meals almost every single day. I know people who work in New York City who can spend three figures easily on meals in the city per day. This is going to kill your ability to save unless you're making millions and millions of dollars. And maybe even if you're making millions and millions of dollars. You can't have both. You can't buy whatever you want and be financially independent and save money. You got to pick one. I am baffled. This poster sounds similar to the person who made the original post. They're both in Seattle. He says, also worked in tech in the Seattle area. It is 200% lifestyle creep. Seeing 250 TC, that stands for total compensation, folks. So these are people making more than $250,000 a year, which is a lot. Living paycheck to paycheck is pathetic. And these guys are too arrogant to think about budgeting because the money will always replenish and they can always find another job. Many come from pretty privileged upbringing anyway, so that's just the quality of life they'll always cling to. Always eating out, ordering food, always making payments on a new car, never putting any money away for retirement, always being broke somehow despite having new outfits, new vacation photos. I have no sympathy for these people. You can't buy whatever you want and save lots of money. You have to pick. If you feel entitled or you're always used to some high level of spending, it's hard to change. If you grew up with parents that didn't spend lots and lots of money, then I think your intuition says, I shouldn't spend lots and lots of money. If you grew up with parents that spent lots and lots of money, I think your intuition is spend lots and lots of money. Next comment says, I would never dare complain about making ends meet on my six-figure income. Never. I originate from a rural area and grew up poor, raised by a single mother. I know what it's like to live as have-not. I also spend more than enough and understand my own lifestyle creep as well. Next comment says, I found the best way to avoid lifestyle creep is to just never let the money hit your bank account in the first place. He's a male, 24 years old, starting working as an engineer 2 years ago at about $80,000 in Seattle. That's crazy money for a 22-year-old. $80,000, congrats to you. I think I started at about $25,000 a year. First thing I did was set my 401k contributions to be 14% with an increase of 1% per quarter until it hit 18%. I was broke out of college and sleeping on an air mattress, so this allowed me to catch up on finances a bit. Every raise since then, I've calculated how much I could increase my savings rate without decreasing my paycheck, and now I'm up to 22%, enough to max in my 401k with a 9% match from an employer. This means he's saving just in his 401k, 22 plus 9 is 31%, and then he's saving an extra 7% in his brokerage account, which is a non-retirement account. So that's kind of awesome. I think that's awesome, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. Time is more valuable than money. If you look around YouTube, you'll find all kind of videos saying this exact same thing. So if you can get some money put away when you're really young, that's gonna pay off huge when it's retirement time, whether that be 50 or 60. So you young people watching, take note of this comment. The next one says, while discussing fire and such, a friend of ours disclosed they had finally saved their first million at age 54 while making $300,000 a year. And that was just her salary. His was higher. Let's look at some facts. Tesla, check. Flying the family around first class, check. City apartment and suburb home, check. Fancy clothes, check. Constantly shopping, check. Budget, no. Retirement planning, no. Tracking spending, no. So what he's saying is if half of you are making $300,000 a year and the other half is making more than that, then you should save $1 million way before you're 54. Like, you're making $750,000 a year. You should be able to save $1 million before 30 years of work. I don't disagree. The next comment says, a very wise and wealthy man once told me, buy a car that's nice enough to show that you're competent, but not so nice that you're telling people you get paid too much. He took that same approach to food and wine. This comment says, also in Seattle, also making salary the way you describe. Unfortunately, it's not lifestyle creep that's hitting our wallets. It's wanting to have a family. You know what it costs to have 2 children around here, both in housing and in care. So there are some counter arguments that, definitely costs are going to go up if you're providing for 4 people or 5 people instead of just 2 people. That's fine. I think you can still have children and save money though, especially if you're making the salaries that the FANG companies are paying. This next comment says, I'll admit to this, I'm almost 50 and around $2 million. My wife and I agreed that when we got to 3 million, we would retire. We're at 5 million now and want to get to 6. Part of that is inflation, but part of it is definitely lifestyle creep. For instance, when I fly internationally for work, my company pays for business class. A couple of times my wife came with me and we went on vacation after my work trip. So she flew business class too. We have found we quite like traveling to Europe for vacation and flying business class. I can agree with that. I'm very tall and don't fit in coach. I hope I can get some sleep so I don't have to experience it while I'm awake. But I would very much like to fly business class to Europe as well. We're also being a bit irrational with our retirement plans. We have enough now that we could retire and pay all of our expenses. But when I quit this job and take a few years off, this golden goose is dead. I can't just restart my career at 55 if I retire at 50 and expect to make the same money. So we're trying to gather enough to make sure we're covered if health insurance costs ratchet up or anything like that. When you're talking about luxury cars, if you do the math, it's not quite as bad as you think. If someone making 7 figures decides to spend $60,000 on a car and maybe keep it for 2 years, that's not what's keeping them from fire. Think about it. Presumably they have a 2-year-old car, sell a trade when they buy their car, if they're buying a car every 2 years. So that's $30K or so down payment. They pay another $30K to own the car for 2 years. If you're making $1 million a year, it's not the $15K you paid for the car each year that's keeping you from. So what did we learn from this post? We learned that you have to be careful to not let your lifestyle creep kill your ability to save. Don't worry about other people. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Focus on saving money. Focus on what you need versus what you want. Make sure you can keep those two things separate. You don't need a 4,000 square foot house. You probably need a 2,000 square foot house. Try to keep those separate. Take some actions that when you get a raise, you don't just spend all of your raise. Put half of it into your retirement and spend the other half, or do something like that. Don't let yourself spend your entire raise. Don't let lifestyle creep kill your savings and your ability to retire when you want to retire. Don't let it kill your financial independence. Thank you everyone for watching. If you have any comments about you like this format or you don't like this format, please put those below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.